And we are back on another exciting episode of Starfleet Boy, where we have a casual and informal conversation about
Extremely.
Star about Star Trek, and we're still focused on Star Trek: The Next Generation, but we are at the penultimate episode of the
Are we?
season. This is the no. There's one more.
No.
There's
There's
sorry, the
more.
host.
Yeah.
The host is the next episode, which I haven't watched either. So well, I watched this episode, but it was like it's been a few weeks.
Yeah, it's been. Indeed,
But
it
I have my
has.
note.
All right.
Even though this is a casual and informal discussion, we do keep. Sometimes I do take notes, and I happen to have taken quite a few notes for this episode. So, Doctor, do you want to give the summary, or shall I?
So that was code for. I don't remember the episode well enough to give the summary. Humbert, I
All
really
right.
hope you can remember. I'll do it, but it's going to be.
So, okay, I'm gonna glance at my
You want
notes
me?
weren't too
No,
long for this
I'll
episode,
do
but
it. I'll
okay,
do
okay,
it.
you do it. All right, you do
I'll
it.
do it. But
I feel like I
my
might
summary.
I might interrupt though if you let me.
If I let you.
That's true.
Geordi is en route to I believe it's Risa
Hmm.
on a shuttle pod, and he's just kind of just starts off kind of boring, and he's playing games with the computers, and somehow the nothing goes off, no alarm bells go off when this Romulan ship decloaks right off the starboard bow, and Geordi is taken by the Romulans, and they hack into his visor, and they start using brainwashing techniques to get him to assassinate somebody, and we don't know who it is, but it's some kind of assassination plot, which of course all bears similarity to one of my favorite films of all time, The Manchurian Candidate. So
The original, of course, not the 2004 remake.
more on that later, but yes, the original is my favorite. The John
Wow.
Frankenheimer. John Frankenheimer is one of my favorite directors. Anyhow, so they managed to brainwash him, and he is all set to kill whoever is the person to be killed on the ship, and he's put back into place. He's given false memories, and he returns to the Enterprise thinking he spent a great time on Risa, and just goes back to duty on the Enterprise. The Enterprise is called to mediate a dispute with a Klingon colony,
Right?
and
Wasn't it? Yeah.
right, and there's a Klingon special envoy is sent, and he personally asks Picard, could you please help us out with this situation, since you're so
That's right.
so good with Klingons and all that stuff, and Picard acquiesces and decides to get involved, and because there's something fishy's going on, and
Well, I like.
they think
Okay.
Federation is giving arms
Right.
to like some rebels on this colony world, and the Klingon governor on the planet believes that it's Starfleet, that they're you're the ones that are trying to stir up trouble here, and now you're here pretending to want to make peace or whatever. So Picard's like, no, we're not involved in this. Take me at my word. We have no interest in your dispute there. And in the investigation, in the episode, we see that Geordi has been brainwashed to kill somebody involved in this investigation, and it all leads up to this moment where the Klingon governor is on board the Enterprise, along with the Klingon special envoy and Picard, and Geordi is on his mission to kill somebody. And meanwhile, Data is trying to figure out. They found that the weapons that the Klingons say are Starfleet issued have a curious E-band residence
Well, no,
of some
the
kind.
E-band was the E-band was what was going into Geordi's brain.
Oh.
The thing you're talking about, I actually remember the science, oddly.
Oh,
No.
that's your job.
That's, I guess it might
It's your
be.
job to
But
remember
the
the
thing
science.
you're talking about,
Okay.
the thing you're talking about was that the Romulan pulse charge had a
Pulse
different
charge.
frequency on the
That's correct.
and the crystals were different because they were
Right.
more efficient than Federation issued things. So yeah, you're 100%.
Right. So where does the E-band come into it? How does that?
The E-band, which I feel like comes up a lot in Star Trek. I think it's like it's like email. I don't know. I'm just kidding. But the E-band was I think the E-band emitter was how the ambassador was sending signals
Gotcha.
to Geordi, which
Okay.
I might have ruined your summary.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. You corrected me. So Data figures out that
it's an awesome summary, by the way.
Data figures out there's some. Thank you, sir. There's somebody sending messages, whatever, on the E-band, and in one of my favorite moments, Data is Lieutenant Worf, I'll apprehend Geordi, and Worf is kind of like, Commander, are you sure? And Data's like, just with no emotion.
That's an order.
Follow my orders.
I actually remember that scene. That is like, we have to actually we're gonna what do you call it? Break that down a little, because I remember that was a great scene.
That's a great scene. And yeah, Worf stops Geordi. Well, no, actually Picard stops Geordi. And Geordi was going to kill the Klingon governor, and it's revealed that the Klingon envoy was the one working with the Romulans, and the Klingons take him, and the final scene in the episode, one of the best endings of any episode this season, is Geordi with Troy, and Troy finally doing her job. Thank God they gave Troy something to do that is pertinent to her position on the ship. She's there with Geordi, and Geordi's like, but I remember these things. And Troy's like, I know you're supposed to, but it didn't happen. I need you to remember what really happened. And then she's using this technique, and then she says, tell me what happened after, something. She says something in the conversation, then he suddenly says, oh, and then the Romulan ship, and then he's like, he suddenly realizes that he remembers something he didn't remember before, and it just Geordi is left in a very unsure place at the end of this episode. It's not a happy ending at all by any means, and it's an unsettling ending for Geordi, and I that's it. That's the episode.
Very good.
What did you think?
I thought it was great. Did you mention, because I was looking something up at one point, that the silhouette figure in the background?
Oh, yes.
A little bit more about that.
A little hint of who that might be.
Yeah, and when I was young, I didn't get the hint, but now I'm like, that's Denise Crosby's voice.
You're right. When we were young, we didn't pick up. I did not pick up on it either, because that was so out of left field.
It was really out of left field. It felt like
no way that you could even have like, what? Yeah. That was totally out of left field.
That was an excellent summary. I have to say, I appreciate it when others do the summary, because it takes a little bit of weight off of my my Starfleet boy's head. Before we continue, though, I think I do want to take a minute, because I also share a love of John Frankenheimer's movies. So in Starfleet boy fashion, we'll list through his movies here. Doctor.
Oh, it's Ronan. I'll give you my top 5. Manchurian Candidate is definitely up there. Ronan is also one of the best movies he's ever made. But my number 1 movie of John Frankenheimer, and everybody within the sound of my voice needs to see this film. It's called The Train. It was the last major black and white drama produced in Hollywood. It stars the amazing Burt Lancaster.
Wow.
It's one of his best films. And the setup is this. I know we're going off topic here, but the setup is this. It starts off at the end of World War II. They're in the Louvre, and there is a Nazi colonel, and the woman in charge of the museum is thanking him for not letting the Germans ransack and trash the treasures of Paris, in the museum in the Louvre, and the colonel's like, well, I love art just as much as you do, and this is priceless, and this represents the world's finest art treasures. And then all of a sudden you see these German soldiers come in and start packing it all up, and she's like, Monsieur, what is this? What are you doing? And he says, I'm taking it all back with me to Germany.
Yep.
Why do you think I was looking out for this? and she's just like, she's flabbergasted. So she goes to the French Resistance, led by Burt Lancaster. I know it's a stretch, but go with me. So Burt Lancaster is the head of the French Resistance, and he could care less about this museum. He's like, the Allies are gonna take back Paris in 3 days. The war is over. I am not going to lose another man over pretty pictures on the wall. And that's his stance. But as it gets out that the art treasures of Paris are leaving, other people in the resistance are like, the soul of France. The soul of France.
It's true.
And they start trying to sabotage the train, and that's why the movie's called The Train. All of this artwork is on a train, and they all start sabotaging the train that's going to leave France to go to Germany. And Burt Lancaster, who is supposed to be the hero, he is the hero, but he doesn't really understand why people are sacrificing themselves for this damn artwork. And I don't want to give the ending away, but there is a scene in the end of the movie where he confronts the Nazi colonel, and the Nazi colonel says, you don't understand what all these people have died for. I do, but you don't. And it's just such a wonderful film, apart from the cinematography and it's a very underrated film. I don't think many people have seen it, but I recommend it highly.
Very cool.
So I think I should shut up now because
ladies and gentlemen, that was the end of our podcast about The Train. I hope you enjoyed it. No, I'm just kidding.
Good night,
folks.
That
was great. That was great, actually. I never mind us going on tangents and riffs on the show, so I actually appreciate that because after all, there is a component of this show which is documentary, and so now we've documented that very nice homage to.
By the way?
Not The Train. No, now I have to watch it. I've only seen the Manchurian Candidate, the French Connection.
He did part 2. He didn't do the original.
Oh, yeah. I've never. So when I looked here, I was like, the French Connection. That's not him. And then
that's Roman Friedkin. Yeah. And by the way, the French Connection 2 is a great film as well. Fantastic film.
Yeah. I guess I've seen. Let's see here. Oh, of course, The Island of Dr. Moreau, and
we've all seen The Island of Dr. Moreau.
I saw Reindeer Games. So I don't think I've seen a lot of. I don't think I've seen a lot of Frankenheimer films. I thought I did, but I have only seen The Manchurian Candidate and a few of his most recent ones. I will now check out The Train. I hope it's on one of the streamers.
Unfortunately, it is not.
Do you have it?
It is available on physical media, which I have.
I feel like we need another field trip, Doctor.
to Nimbus 3, the planet of galactic peace.
um, I'm gonna go straight to my notes for this. Oh, actually, one there is something. I did take another. There's a separate set of notes, which is Starfleet Boy updates. I follow Larry Namasek, who we've been calling Larry Namasek all this time. I think
Oh
he
no! Don't tell me
yes,
we've been mispronouncing his name all this
I,
time.
I think Larry, it's actually Namachek, which is actually a cool sounding name.
Fuck.
I know this whole time. How could we know? We've only ever read his name.
Sorry.
Mr. Namachek. We apologize from the bottom of our hearts.
And
four
still
seasons.
We still adore you.
4 seasons of Starfleet Boy later, we find out how to pronounce your name. So do you want to know how I may have found this information out?
Is it through his Instagram?
Yes, so I want to give a plug to Larry Namachek's Instagram. He's on Twitter. He's very active. He's
I follow him on Instagram as well.
Yeah, and he's actually anytime I've ever asked a question, whether I think it's silly or stupid or not, he always answers. He's a very kind and generous person. So thank you. And of course, we always read from the book. So I was going to propose in honor of Larry Namachek's discovering his correct name. Why don't we start this episode with some facts, and then we could go to our notes after that. What do you think, Doctor?
Oh, okay. All right. Sure. All right. All right. We'll do that.
Let's go to the book.
The book.
by what's the name now?
It's the next Star Trek Next Generation companion.
By
Larry Nemechek.
Yes.
Nemechek,
I think. Nemechek.
Gosh, I had no idea. All right.
How could you tell me how to pronounce my name if you've never heard it?
No, I know. No, I know, because I mean,
he's such a nice person. He'll forgive us. I know. I already know it.
You should really reach out to him.
I know.
I don't know if he would do this show, but I don't know if this is a show. I don't know what
there's a possibility he would, but we don't have the, how do you say, like, we need a production coordinator to
production coordinator
to figure out all these things. So actually, I've already put out the call for we needed a database person. So today we're asking
a data.
That's right. We need a data on the show. Inquire at starfleetboy@gmail.com or Sohail, SOH.
Nobody cares.
At starfleetboy.com. We also are looking for a willing to work for free production coordinator. So.
Good luck. Good luck.
Keeping it real, Doctor. It's always the way to do it.
What does he have to say? He says that let's see. David Livingston was the director. He was a line producer. He goes all the way back to the original pilot. But this is his first shot at directing. And
hey, we might have a special guest star here. Hold on. Hey, we're recording.
Larry?
No, it's not Larry Nemechek. It's Geordi Scott. Hey, we're recording.
Geordi Scott, great Scott.
How's it going? Pretty good. You're on the air with the doctor. Let me see if I can get you to hear him. Hold on. He's really excited.
I don't think I want to be on the air right now.
Oh. Okay. Well, I'll call you.
Call me. Hi, doctor.
Hi. How are you?
I don't feel well, but call me later.
All right, we'll do. Okay. That was an update from Geordi Scott from Terok Nor. All right,
feel better, Scott.
Thank you. All right, that was nice.
That was nice.
Geordi Scott is actually moving back to Terok Nor. Yesterday was he's probably referring to our revels last night, which were in honor of his departure from Earth Space Dock. He's heading to Las Vegas. He's moving back to Las Vegas. Yeah. So I understand. Perhaps he may have had a little too much Romulan ale.
Romulan ale. So he crossed the neutral zone there. Wow.
Note to the galley.
No Romulan ale on official functions, diplomatic functions. He notes.
Sorry, go on.
This is the first use of the visor, Geordi's visor, as a point of view since the episode Heart of Glory back in season 1.
Interesting. And I noticed that the way it's depicted is very similar to that episode, but it's just a little bit different in this episode. Like, it's updated somehow, and maybe that's because the Romulans have infiltrated it. I don't know, but it is it's a little more green than it was in that episode. Overall, the visuals of the visor view.
He also notes that the director actually tried unsuccessfully to get someone from the movie to appear in the episode as an extra. And of course, as fans of the film will know, the scene where Geordi shoots O'Brien and 10 Forward is a direct homage to a scene in the movie, in the original film. And this also establishes Geordi's preference for guitar music, which will echo later on in his dinner date with Leah Brahms in Oh no, wait a minute, that's already happened. Galaxy's Child, hasn't it?
Oh wait, we're a few episodes away from the finale. There's also In Theory coming up, which is, you reminded me with the guitar thing, I think.
But isn't I think Galaxy's Child has already happened.
That already happened, yep.
Okay, so then this echoes that.
And
what else does he notice for some? It's the first Next Generation look at the Klingon and Romulan transporter beams. The Klingon beam is a quick, solid red wipe from top to bottom with a few residual gold sparkles. The Romulan uses a green beam that dissolves rapidly with little shimmer.
This is true.
And then he notes...
That's an interesting thing. I've always liked so, you know, talk about technology changing and stuff like that. But like, do you remember we used to talk about our favorite transporter effects?
Oh yeah, we still do.
Like,
don't we?
Yeah, we still do. But like, I think I haven't had it. I don't think I've had an update. Like my favorite is still the Star Trek Wrath of Khan transporter effect and sound.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just sounds like it's ripping apart.
I have a fondness for the Star Trek one, just like vroom.
Well, the motion picture still use that cool chimey effect sound.
Yeah, but it's like it looks like
beam,
it's a solid beam,
like a cylindrical thing.
Yeah, right. Actually. I have a fondness for that. I don't know why.
Because it looks like a shower.
It's just cool. I like that one. But
the Klingon effect that was kind of established as was in Star Trek 3 was a pretty good effect as well.
Yeah.
Do you remember like the two beams would just like split apart? It was a pretty cool effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a cool thing to point out.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go. In the kind of things that you were talking about, it brought up a lot of memories of the episode, so I feel better. But what do you think? The question I wrote here is what do you think fake Geordi was doing on Risa? That's what
he does tell Troy a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, but there was like a fake.
But then Troy was kind of like, "But you didn't meet anybody or anything." And oh crap! You know, this reminded me. I have some pie here. I haven't eaten yet. Sorry, that's a totally unrelated to anything. But yeah, he just. I think the whole point is that he knew what happened, but it wasn't meant to be like super memorable. Because it had to sort of sit there and it couldn't be something that called much attention to itself. So I don't think it's not like Geordi got lucky with like the best sex he's ever had or anything like that. Or
no, but fake Geordi.
You know.
Remember in this interrogation scene where the Romulan scientist is showing off how they can like brainwash him. Basically, there's like a fake LaForge, like an altered Romulan that comes in, and he looks like Geordi sort of, and he goes to Risa. So I imagine in like first of all, I imagine the investigation, the investigation, they probably were like, that's not Geordi. Okay. Remember that scene?
No, I don't actually.
There's a whole scene
that I don't remember. There's a scene. There's a fake Geordi that goes to Risa in his place.
That's how elaborate the plot was by the Romulans. I don't remember that part. Yeah, it's a great scene. That's why I wrote that.
I thought he just didn't go.
No, that's the thing, is that could have been like someone would have said like Commander LaForge didn't come to the symposium or whatever. There's always a symposium.
Oh, I never realized. I missed that.
Yeah, it was a crazy thing. It was in the same scene where we have the shadowy Sela figure.
Oh, so you're asking what did that guy do?
Yeah, it was just as a joke. I was like, what did I wonder what he was doing.
He definitely had the best sex in his life. He's like, damn, I'm over the border here. I'm gonna
What do you think of that?
Show these rising girls what Romulan ale really does.
What do you think of human sensibilities in the future? Because clearly Risa and what happens in Risa speaking of Las Vegas, what happens on Risa stays on Risa.
We're talking about an episode with this Manchurian candidate like plot, and this is what you're asking? Really? I don't know.
These are the things
how great this episode is.
It is a great episode. It is. Why not get rid of the ridiculous things first, and then we can go to the sublime at the end, right? Speaking of ridiculous, the other thing I did notice, I have a minutia for sound effects and sound design. That little squeaking sound / transmitting sound that we hear every time we see Geordi's view. It's the same. That sound is like a lot more subtle in the background in the Lursa and B'Etor scenes in Generations, if I'm not mistaken. Wow. I didn't watch again to verify it, but I was like, hey, I remembered that sound. And so I don't know, I might be wrong.
Not worth a rewatch of Generations, sorry. But I'll take your word for it. You have to rewatch it for our discussion, Doctor. So that's a long ways away.
That's a long ways away.
On the note about the visor, I was actually, of all things, how do you call it? Tor Books, TOR, that publishing house. They do a lot of science fiction books. They actually have a kind of a Next Generation rewatch going on their website, I guess.
Oh.
And this guy reviewed the episode, and he mentions that, and I guess this is his way of tying it into the books, is that the visor, the Romulans obviously hacked into the visors, and it's a security risk. This visor, apparently, because we see it in this episode, we see it in Generations. So this is kind of an ongoing security concern here, that this one officer on the Federation keeps getting hacked. So apparently, and I'm going to read direct from the website. Sometime between Generations and First Contact, LaForge went from visor to bionic implants, and the story of this is the story, The Insolence of Office, by William Lesner, part of the ebook miniseries Slings and Arrows, edited by your humble rewatcher, chronicled how that happened. Starfleet ordered him to do it or be transferred to a less sensitive post.
Wow.
Since the time between films was the height of paranoia over Dominion infiltration, as seen in contemporary episodes of Deep Space Nine, the security risk of the visor was too much for Starfleet to be comfortable with.
That's a really interesting spin on things. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do start to get the towards the end of the season, you know, we've been having this like kind of ongoing back and forth between you and I about the Romulans
Yes.
and their level, like they're just their, like, I guess their purpose in Next Generation. And like I think that the gist of it is that you remember it as like being like this balloon that kind of started to expand and then fizzled, kind of just like nothing nothing
Right.
happened. And I
Right.
remember it as being a bigger deal. Like I think that for me the balloon popped, but then you said also that it didn't really actually, like, it goes on into Deep Space Nine, I guess, with the Romulans. But I'm starting to feel like that my balloon wasn't as big as I thought
Are
it
you?
was. Yeah, but at the same time, I do think it's interesting because I wonder if this was intentional or if it just by the fact that, like, you know, I don't know enough about the, you know, the writing and the behind the scenes and everything like that. But I do see that the Romulans kind of are representing it, that Romulan character might be a little ahead of its time, because today we have these shadowy, you know, kind of activities that governments are conducting, which don't really lead to wars per se, but create a great deal of difficulty and nuisance for those trying to do perhaps good things, you know. And so you really start to see that here in this episode, where the Federation and like it's in season 5, I think, not too far from now, that I remember there was that episode with the Admiral, that Ensign Rose episode.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like the Federation's not.
Isn't that this season?
No, that's next season.
It's next
Ensign
season?
Rose.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Wait, we should probably like.
No, you're probably right. It is next season. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
But anyways, I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, we're starting to see like under the care of Gene Roddenberry, the Federation was just pretty, you know, I thought, magnanimous and good on the whole, you know. And like now you start to see these things like where, you know, they're being accused of bad things, but then later you see that there actually might be agents that are working against the ideals of the Federation, even more than under Gene Roddenberry. And I think that's an interesting concept, because it actually is kind of how it feels like the world is, you know. Like one thinks of the United Nations much like the United Federation of Planets, and there's just constantly like things that are trying to undermine or like loosen this federation, if you will, and one wonders where that's coming from. It's very shadowy.
Well, the again, you know, I've said, like you said, I've said that the use of the Romulans, I've always been a little disappointed that the Romulans have never really come forward as the grand villain that I think they could be. And I think this episode, as great as it is, I think showcases the best qualities of the Romulans as villains and the worst quality of the Romulans as villains. And I'll start off with the bad, which is that, you know, when you have a bad guy that just remains in the shadows all the time, then it's very easy to just overlook that villain. Because really, I mean, I don't know about you, but the big takeaway I had from this episode were the Klingon characters, and of course the Klingon characters, just by the very nature of being Klingon, are larger than life. They tend to be more charismatic one way or the other. They're louder, they're brasher, so you tend to remember them more. And whereas the Romulans are, even though they've been very lucky with the actors that they've had so far. I mean, we had the guy who played Tomalak, who's a great actor. There was the guy who was the defector. I forget what his name was. You know, actors with great voices to distinguish themselves. But yet the Romulan characters, you know, they somehow they just manage to just stay in the background, and they don't make. I mean, a few of them do make an impression, like the two that I just mentioned, and of course, you know, we'll see what's her name come Sela come later. But in general, the Romulan characters don't make much of an impression, and two, I don't think are allowed to make much of an impression because we don't have many returning Romulan characters, whereas we do get a growing roster of returning Klingons. You know, we're going to get Gowron, and we get Worf's brother, and eventually we get this guy on DS9, the guy with the one eye. Really, how many Romulans? I mean, okay, we mentioned Tomalak, but over the course of Next Generation, we don't get sort of a returning Romulan character, and I think it would have been nice if we'd seen one of the previously used Romulan characters on this episode, or, well, we do get Sela, but then she's in the background.
Right, but the thing is, if we had, I guess the thing is that like the way I see it, I agree with what you're saying, by the way, but the way I see it is that I feel like it is a little weird because like you almost sense that the Romulans over the course of the Next Generation and the TNG films, you almost sense that the Romulans and the Federation will eventually join the Federation in just kind of like a okay, why not sort of way. Do you know what I mean? Like, especially in Nemesis. Well, in Nemesis, you get this like
in Nemesis, but that's so many years later.
Right, but that's what I'm saying is eventually I am talking about like the larger arc here. Like, remember, we're not just confined to
right, but I'm speaking contemporaneous with the episode.
Yeah, I guess so. You know? At this point, like it is all I remember about like as a kid watching this and like watching the whole Romulan thing unfold is that I did want more, and maybe that was the purpose. Like that was the way it was written on, was to just get us to like want more. And you're saying it never delivers though, right? Like I feel like it does. I say
because deliver. I mean, in a way, it does deliver because, of course, the Romulans do succeed in generating a Klingon civil war.
Right.
I mean, they are trying. They're always trying. I mean, they're trying to. I mean, if you want to make parallels to Russia, they're fomenting, distrust among groups and all this stuff around the world. But they never sort of step forward and be the grand villain and be like, "Ooh, we've won." You know what I'm saying? You don't get that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the thing about how the shadowy figure is some things very contemporary, but I actually saw the shadowy figure as something older, sort of like a Dr. Mabuse or Dr. Mabuse, where he's kind of like, the evil mind that you never see. And
I don't know that reference, but go on.
That's Fritz Lang. He had a character that he created before he left Germany before the war, and it's kind of like the prototypical evil mastermind that you only see in shadows. And of course, the old movie serials would have the guy, in a hood, and you didn't know who he was,
Right. It's something that's it's continue. This is something that we continue to see throughout television today. I mean, like even
it's a trope that you just see over and over again.
Yeah, even Doctor Who, uses it.
Right. Exactly.
Like, yeah. Okay, I get you.
Right. But eventually, okay, let's take.
I like Doctor Who. So is the origin Dr. Mabuse?
Possibly. I don't know. I'm not
that's
a
cool.
film. I'm only an amateur film historian, but whatchamacallit, let's take Doctor Who, for example. The Master, often the plots that he's involved in Doctor Who, he's kind of like this hidden figure, but eventually he does pull the curtain and reveal himself, and he's like, I am the Master. But the Romulans never take that moment to pull the curtain. And that's what I'm saying never happens in Next Generation. We never see that moment.
I think it's because but Doctor, I think it's because it's never a secret that they're behind it all. I mean, Picard even everyone's talking about how the Romulans are behind everything, and even Picard, when there's like I forget a few episodes back, there was like a cloaked vessel, and he jumps to the notion, he's like, oh, it's got to be the Romulans. You know what I mean? So
But
I think that
they never have absolute proof. That's the thing.
You're just upset that there was never a space battle.
Yes, of course. Yes. Yes.
Okay, absolutely. I get it now.
Absolutely.
I am also upset. Okay, I get it now. I see what you're saying. I agree then. I share that there should have been a space battle. You know, something I have to say about Star Trek is I wish that there were like I wish in Star Trek Discovery we get a space battle in the first 2 episodes, of course, but but it's not
that show.
But it's not exciting. It's not as exciting. It's not as exciting as it could be. I just started watching because everyone's talking about it, so I just started watching that show, The Expanse. And
which
now
is canceled, by the way.
It's canceled, but apparently there's a huge campaign. That's why I started thinking about it, is because like there's a huge campaign. So fans of The Expanse are hoping that Netflix or Amazon will pick it up. Do you watch that show? Are you
No,
up on it?
I haven't watched that show at all, actually.
Well, I feel like the space scenes are just great. And I also feel the same way about Lost in Space, like all the kind of visuals. You need a certain like
pizzazz,
grandiose. You need ships to come really close to the camera, and this has been a complaint that I've kind of had about Star Trek, even in the new Kelvin series, which is very flashy and high level production. You just don't see the ships for long enough. You do see finally in Star Trek Beyond, you do have these like gorgeous shots when the Enterprise is going through that misty, nebula or whatever. But I just feel like everything's just like so fast, and like you need a little grace. You need a little like you want to see like you want to see like a phaser beam like slicing through and like hurting a ship, like in Star Trek 2. That's what's brilliant about the battle between the Reliant and the Enterprise, is that it's not just a cool battle, but you feel like you're hurt, like the ship, you can feel the pain. Yeah, like you can feel the pain of the ship as it like buckles under the pressure and like all that stuff. And so that's definitely something that that's missing in Star Trek, that you hoped. I didn't think that these other shows would do it better than the Star Trek show. I thought Star Trek, would be the one that did it the best. But I personally, this person here is hoping that season 2 of Discovery has a great production value. But going back to the Manchurian Candidate episode, I think for the most part, watching it again, and I think that's reflective here in this kind of hodgepodge discussion that we're having. But watching it again for me, when I watched it a few weeks ago, the excitement's gone because you already know what happens. Like I remembered like pretty much within a few minutes of watching the episode that it was the ambassador who was the culprit, and like that Geordi had been brainwashed and he wasn't actually gonna kill the governor and all that stuff. But of course, when I was watching it for the first time as a kid, those dangers were real, like, at the time when shows are actually airing, what's beautiful about their first airings, of course, is that like you really don't know what's going to happen, and any character is subject to the axe or the writer's chopping block, as it were. So who knows? It could have been Geordi's last episode. There was like a real danger to that. And so I didn't feel those feelings watching it again, of course, because we know the outcome. So what I gravitated to immediately to was just like kind of watching the structure of the episode and like how it was filmed and directed and things like that, and just like a lot of the little more subtle scenes. Like one thing that like stood out to me was like when Geordi comes back from Risa, that like whole exchange between he and Counselor Troy. It's very endearing and touching. It's like a little character moment, and he even like he even like says to her like, oh, but you don't want to hear about that, and she gets upset, like, and he goes in, closes the door, and then she's kind of like, but I do want to hear about that. So
that's all she wanted to hear about. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that really stood out, and I think it deserves like a moment and maybe even a discussion, was just like the actor who plays the governor against Picard. The governor's dynamic against Picard is pretty awesome, because the whole time he's mistrusting of Picard, he's mistrusting of the Federation, and here's Picard trying to defend. Like, at first he's like, the Federation would never, Starfleet and the Federation would never do such a thing, and he's like, oh yeah, well, here's like a freaking Federation issued, Starfleet issued rather, phaser rifle. How do you explain that? And then Picard's kind of having to explain that. And the scene in particular that I enjoyed was when he says, what was it? You speak the lies of a Tar-Kek. And then Picard go just like, it's a very tight shot, like goes head to head with him, and he goes, Zhong-Chi, sha 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 sha. I don't know what he says. But he goes, what does he say?
You swear.
He goes, you swear well, Picard. You must have Klingon blood in your veins. So I remember that. That was one of the notes I took. So that was like a great scene. Another thing that was enjoyable, as you were saying about the charisma, like, people playing the person playing this role of the Klingon ambassador, was a great. You could tell he's a pretty, fun actor to follow. I don't know his name. We'll have to look him up. Let's actually do that right now. But I guess like I just liked his performance, and especially his cowardly kind of ending, where at first he's like, you won't search me, and then the governor's like, I'm forced to agree with the ambassador Picard. We will take him back and search him, and you could tell it's not going to be a pleasant thing, because immediately he's like, I request asylum, and then Picard says, I will gladly grant you asylum when you have been cleared of these charges. That was like the worst Picard voice. But the actor who played the governor is named Edward Wiley. He doesn't even have a picture on IMDb, so I'm afraid to click on his thing. And Lawrence Dobkin, who also doesn't have a picture on IMDb, credited as Larry Dobkin, played the Ambassador Kell. And let's see what he's done. Anyways, when IMDb kicks back in, but yeah, I thought that those were really good. Oh, he was in the Wild Wild West. Looks like the original one.
Oh, cool.
The Ten Commandments, Patton.
Well, I will say this: Larry Dobkin, who plays the ambassador, was the director of original episode of Star Trek.
Really?
He was the director of the episode Charlie X.
Whoa.
And
he's done a lot of directing. That's cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there it is, Charlie X. Dang, he's an accomplished director.
Now,
Lawrence
you should
Dobkin.
look up the guy who plays the Romulan. Tybach.
Let's take a look at him here. John Fleck. Why do we know John Fleck?
Why do we know John Fleck? Take a look, sir.
I'm looking. As an actor, you mean, or as something else?
Yes. No, on Star Trek. He's been on Star Trek many times.
Oh, look, he's Silic.
There we
Enterprise.
go.
Oh,
Silic
cool.
on Enterprise. Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, indeed.
Very nice. Well done.
Yeah. Well done, sir.
The master of disguise. Look at that.
Yeah.
And he's on Deep Space Nine.
Right. Yeah. So he's one of those actors that has just, but see, there I go to my point, which is that this was an actor who obviously liked Star Trek, was willing to come back to Star Trek. Why didn't Tybeck come back to Next Generation after, this appearance? Why didn't we have a reoccurring Romulan presence? Because really, it boils down to just, every once in it's almost like they keep switching. I mean, Garon stays around for the rest of the show pretty much, but yeah, they tried out what's his name, The first guy, I forgot what his name is now.
Not Kim Peck.
Whatever. The other Romulan, the one who was on Babylon 5, the one who comes back in the last episode.
Oh, Gull, not Gull. What's his name? Tomalak.
Tomalak. And then we get Sela for a while, but then even she goes away, and we never see her again. So it's like
maybe
the Romulans. You know what I'm saying? Like they keep throwing Romulans at us, but none of them stick, and I don't understand why. Because I think they do work. I liked Tomalak. I liked Sela. I like this guy.
What do you think though? Like Nero was an interesting. I mean, I just don't know. I don't know how to answer your question.
I know you don't have the answer, but yeah, I don't understand why we just never had a reoccurring. You know, the opportunity was there, and then the other thing that I wanted to say is to your point. You know, you were saying how when you were watching the episode, a lot of the tension is gone because you know where it goes. But I would also add that another reason why you may be slightly bored by the episode is because it's not only that there's no tension in the episode, there is tension in the episode, what you know is that when you get to the end of the episode, nothing resonates beyond this episode, even though it should. If you think about it, what Geordi goes through in this episode is traumatic.
It's super traumatic.
It's on the level of when Picard gets kidnapped by the Cardassians, and he's like, two lights or whatever. Like this
four
is
lights.
traumatic.
There's always 4 lights.
There are okay. Sorry, I don't know. I only have 2 lights.
There are 4
lights. But you get what I'm saying?
More like you do it more like at the end when he's dying.
That's how I feel right now. The ending is so good, and it's almost and for it to happen to Geordi, which when you think about it, Geordi, remember, is the guy who made a friend with a Romulan earlier in the season.
Right. It is pretty effed up.
So, and I would even go further and say that I wish that the episode had perhaps established, I feel it's implied, but it is not established, that they picked Geordi on purpose, not only because of the visor, but because he had a thing for Tasha. If you recall, way back in season 1, when Riker gives him the power of sight, what does he say? He sees Tasha, he's like, oh my God, And then in the Naked Now, they share a moment of close intimacy and all that stuff, and you feel that there was a connection there of almost unrequited something that just Geordi, and it just never materialized because Tasha was taken away too soon. So the idea that her daughter would commit this plot upon him of all people makes it feel more insidious.
It is so good.
But
you're right. It doesn't really
the episode never really goes for it. This is Next Generation has many strengths, but one of its weaknesses is that you have episodes like this where things happen to their characters, they put them through the ringer, and then there's absolutely zero resonance. Next week it's just, hey guys, I'm back. It's just another day, another dollar, and nothing. There's no ramifications except for Picard, for Data, and Worf. That's it.
And I wonder why it is that TV feels so different, from just like that era, which wasn't that long ago, 30 years ago.
Not really.
Like 30 years ago, that was nothing, right?
Come on.
But like it seems to me as simple as just like creating a whiteboard where you just like remember this character went through this, and like we got to do something about it, and so hey, writers, like don't forget to write this in. But there was an intentional reason why that didn't happen, and I think it probably I guess the obvious thing is it had to do with how syndication worked.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, you didn't see like syndicated episodes weren't necessarily aired in order, or at least they weren't. Sometimes you would do like these, just like the VHSs that came out that were like compilations. You would have like the 5 episodes that like pertain to the Romulan Klingon, skirmishes or whatever, like, and they would do these compilations, but there wasn't really like, you couldn't really watch episodes in a whole season. So what does that say about, about modern television though? Because now it's a whole different way of watching it. I'm following that show Krypton, and it's more of a like like everything kind of bleeds through. Like the pain of the last episode continues into like a few episodes. It's more like a mini series or like like a very long movie.
It's serialized, yeah.
It's serialized, yeah. But I don't know if I like that better. I wonder if there's like, because I do feel like a show like Star Trek: The Next Generation still has a lot of value in those individual episodes. You know what I mean? Like, so I don't know. It's a tough thing, but like, I definitely agree that this was a missed opportunity by the show, was to not kind of reflect on what Geordi went through. And I did actually like watching it this time. I was prompted to look up, hey, like, when did brainwashing begin? And I like my research took me down the rabbit hole, and it, like, all the way back to this, like, this like book that was written in, like, in the 1500s or the 1400s about how to like how to get witches to confess their crimes and things like that. So yeah, it goes all the way back to then. But of course, like, the Manchurian Candidate comes up again because it wasn't till the Russians and the Koreans and, like, some of the more dictatorial type totalitarian type governments tend to employ these kinds of methods, because they don't necessarily think that humans beyond their own people within their own government are valuable. So so you get all kinds of horrible things happening, like what the Romulans did to Geordi. But one thing I thought you brought up earlier about, like, the actors in this episode, and like, just like, why aren't they coming back, and things like that, like, that character. I did notice one thing I took a note about was that there were a lot of extras in this episode. The episode felt full in terms of its like characters, like like, for example, when Geordi's doing the review in engineering, there's 6 other engineers in that scene, like, and then they of course shoot scenes in 10 forward, and every time you do that, you have to have like a bunch of extras and stuff like that. So I felt like that was a really cool aspect about this episode that didn't really go anywhere outside of the the Enterprise and like the Romulan ship and the colony, that one room where the governor, his office, I guess,
right? It's makeup,
Yeah, so I think the episode definitely got a lot of attention as far as that's concerned. I guess, yeah, that covers our notes. My notes, anyways. The most important, sorry, I didn't talk about this, but like, okay, so what did stand, I started to talk about this, I just remembered, is what stood out was the whole build up to Geordi trying to assassinate the I thought from the scene when Data starts realizing something's suspicious, when he's doing a inquiry, everything's just like so good, that whole scene, like Data going to intercuts between the thing. Yep, everything. The editing.
It's very tense.
Siri wanted a little attention. That was really weird.
Uh-oh.
Anyways,
it's the Manchurians.
The
They're listening.
Dude. Hey Siri, play the soundtrack for the Manchurian Candidate.
There's 2.
Here's the Manchurian Candidate, music from the motion picture.
This sounds like Riker playing in a in a jazz lounge.
That sounds like the original, I'd say. Yeah, the sequence is great. Geordi.
Yeah, the whole thing, but again, again with that awesome ending, and then the little epilogue with Troy, like you really do hope that there's more, but no.
Right,
That's it.
there isn't. That's it.
That's it. We're done. Geordi miraculously bounces back. He has therapy behind the scenes. Every now and then he just thinks about Leah Brahms, and everything's good. Are we ready for the ratings, Doctor?
Well, I do have and this is unrelated, but I did want to know your thoughts on the remake of The Manchurian Candidate. Do you have any?
Is it with Denzel Washington, right?
The one with Denzel Washington, yes.
I haven't seen it.
I had great resistance to that film when it originally came out. I watched it in the theater. I remember distinctly not liking it at all.
Oh, wow.
I rewatched it with Emma because I felt I've read a lot of stuff on it since then saying how good it is. And I said to myself, let me give it a rewatch. Maybe I had, sometimes you love something so much that you when remakes come along or reboots or whatever, you're kind of like, you need time. And I rewatched it, and I think it has more resonance now than it did then. I think the scenario of the remake seemed so outlandish at the time, but yet that is exactly what has happened now.
Oh, wow, it's one of those kinds of films.
So both films I recommend. Of course, I recommend the original,
which we didn't even mention. I don't think that the original stars Frank Sinatra.
The great Frank Sinatra, one of his best roles.
Frank Sinatra fans out
and
there.
Janet Leigh, I believe, is the lead actress, correct?
Isn't it? I haven't seen The Manchurian Candidate in long, but I remember it was Angela Lansbury. No.
Oh no, she plays the mother.
Oh, that's right.
She's the reason I hate Angela Lansbury.
That's right.
That movie. I never trusted Angela Lansbury after The Manchurian Candidate. I kept watching every episode of Murder, She Wrote, expecting her to be the killer.
That's right.
Because of that movie. I never trusted Angela Lansbury ever.
I forgot about that. Oh, I guess I need to revisit both the original Manchurian Candidate, and now I'll have to see the newer one, the 2004 version.
Directed by the late Jonathan Demme.
15%.
And again, the direction of the episode was fabulous. The scene where Geordi is walking down the corridor, it's like a fisheye lens.
Oh yeah,
and remember it had that
angle. Yeah, that was a great great
shot.
Those were the kinds of things. That's exactly. So that's what I was trying to say earlier. Is that like those were exactly the kind of things that resonated with me watching it this time. Like I just really thought it was a finely made episode. Like it was
absolutely,
very yeah,
really was. When they're trying to get him to shoot O'Brien. I mean, of all the people to shoot,
right.
O'Brien, like everybody's favorite transporter chief, and the way Geordi just says, yeah, okay, he just shoots him, and then he just, okay, go sit down with the other guys, okay, and they sit down, and that's of course the way it is in the film.
Yeah, it's super spooky, very played beautifully by the actors also. And which, we can't close our episode without saying kudos to LeVar Burton, who's excellent. He holds this episode.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It's not an easy thing to convey what like to act like normal, but being brainwashed. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It's just like, but he's really great. He's really great.
Are we at that moment?
I think we're at that moment, Doctor. I have nothing more to say. So I will give the rating first from now on as tradition when it's you, because I have your tantrums of how my rating changed because of yours. So I give this episode an 8.5, and it was originally, when we started the discussion, I was actually going to give it a 9, but I do think that like I don't know if it affects your rating, but your argument about the Romulans really actually got me a little, kind of miffed at the episode. And then I was going to give it like I said, I was going to give it a 9, but I have to knock it down a point because I didn't realize, and I had forgotten, it is such a powerful scene. I mean, like, it truly is. Like, I think it's one of the great scenes that are not ever referenced in Star Trek: The Next Generation, when Geordi's being debriefed or reprogrammed or whatever Counselor Troy's doing to try to help him. It's a really powerful scene, and
it is, right?
And it does like hit you emotionally, and so there's no consequence for what happened to Geordi today. Just obviously in it, even then, I think it might have been a thought that that one had, like, it's like, oh, whatever happened to that, like, so, and obviously it was a thought because you had that thought. So it's like,
he looks absolutely anguished in that final scene.
Yeah, it's really good, really beautifully acted, and just kind of a very powerful moment. But yeah, nothing happens, so that kind of knocked it down to an 8.5 for me, and so that's my rating.
Well, I the correct answer is that it's an 8. And yeah, and I give it an 8 because for precisely the same reasons that you said, which, I mean, I can definitely see 2 or 3 episodes spinning off of this one. I mean, they could have had a later episode where it's just, imagine an episode with just Geordi and Troy, trying to, Geordi can't get over the fact that he shot O'Brien or something. He keeps having that reoccurring memory. Actually,
even one follow-up episode would have been great, because like, you think about after this moment, I think is pretty heavy. And I don't know, like, our audience, if you've gotten this far in our discussion, please feel free to chime in with your thoughts about it too, because I think the moment's pretty heavy, and it reminds me of what happened kind of like, in the Best of Both Worlds Part 1 and 2, and then you have Picard dealing with it in the episode after.
Absolutely, right.
Mm-hmm. So if we could have, you're right. I do feel like, I think the next episode we get is Data in a romantic relationship. It might have been nice to have like a scene in that episode. But again, who knew, like, episodes were shifted around all the time in seasons. So it was like, that was another problem, is that like sometimes you would have like an episode that was supposed to occur later in the season, like moved,
right,
around and things like that. I remember reading about stuff like that. So anyways, my point is that like just something, a follow-up, just one episode following up, I think would have given that moment what it deserved, like the kind of impact it deserved on this character, on Geordi.
And I think it unfortunately creates a Next Generation, one of the strengths of the show is the ensemble cast, is that you have the feeling that each and every member of that cast is as important as the other. I mean, obviously with the captain being the lead, but still, even within that, every character is highly valued. But when you have episodes like this, that are so impactful to the character, and then there's just no follow-up, it almost creates a two-tier thing. Like, you've got, which is what I feel does happen. You've got Picard and Data and Worf at the top, and then you've got the rest, and it's what happened, obviously in the original show. But I mean, the original show was actually, I mean, it was intentional. I feel in this show, it was not intentional to create a top tier and a second tier. And it's a shame, because I mean, I think LeVar Burton was just as able as any of the other actors on that show to have his ongoing plots or themes or whatever, and he never really got it. He was just, he had great episodes. He's a great character, but he never had the gravitas of, say, Picard or Data or Worf, who had these ongoing arcs. As on DS9, where you look at DS9 and just about everybody has like these ongoing plot lines that they this week it's Kira, this next week it's Bashir. There's always material to grind for these characters, and so yeah.
I think the Next Generation kind of grows up really quickly in season 5, but it's after they only went to 7 seasons, so that it would have been interesting. Let's say that TNG went on kind of like Stargate. What was it, 10 seasons of Stargate or something like that? That tells me that you don't agree. Are you like? Come on, you used to watch Stargate, didn't you? I thought you watched it.
But I think it went on for like 15 and
that's great though. Could you imagine though? Like, I think it's great. I think that like I would have loved it if TNG went on for 15 years. Could you?
I would have liked it if DS9 had gone on for 15 years, but not Next Generation.
I know, it's such a great show. There was a rumored 8th season, right? Like, or is that what the whole DS documentary is about, or some? There's something happened. DS9 documentary is about something like that. And
yeah, I'm curious to see when that comes out.
What happens. Anyway, so that was a lovely discussion here with you, Doctor. I'm glad we could do that, and it's such a good episode. By the way, I want to say that like again, even with that. An 8.5 and an 8 is a pretty high score.
Yeah.
So that's not bad. I think that's cool. It's pretty cool. It shows you how good this episode was. All right. And on that note, it's time to say goodbye. Audience, if you've made it this far, please feel free to follow us on Twitter at Starfleet Boy. You can also follow us on Instagram at Starfleet Boy. We'd like you to subscribe. I think that button is over there somewhere. And please leave your comments down below. And if you want to be Data, referred to as Data on this show, you can be Data. Just your homework project is for the whole 120 or so episodes of Starfleet Boy so far. Compile a database of all of our ratings, and I'll make it easy for you. 19 times out of 20, the ratings are in the last 15 minutes of the episode. There's a few episodes where we start out
it's right at the beginning. Yeah, Best of Both Worlds is one of them.
It's one of those episodes, but 19 times out of 20, you'll find it at the end in those last 15 minutes. Doctor, I look forward to our next discussion, which I think will.
Sorry, I feel sorry for the future Data, because there was a certain time where you changed the ratings. Remember, you changed the meter of the rating. So what the hell is that poor Data gonna do then? He's gonna have to.
I know,
she or he has to. But that's why.
If whoever does this, whoever can do this task will become Data, first of all. So he or she or he will have the honor of being known as Data on our show. But not only that, I'm going to personally confer with you, Doctor, offline, and we'll have to come up with a prize for that person. So that'll be the first contest on Starfleet Boy. Become Data. The Become Data challenge on Starfleet Boy. Do you have what it takes? Anyways, the Doctor thinks you don't. I think you do. What was that? Oh, it's Chewie.
Chewie disagrees. Gotta go.
All right, Doctor. Live long and prosper, and we'll see you next time.